My name is Caleb Morgan. I used to fix engines, drive forklifts, unload trailers, until my whole life flipped upside down and narrowed to one thing: keeping my baby son fed. The night was cold, not just outside, but inside the tiny apartment where Caleb stood in socks beside an empty crib. A secondhand space heater buzzed in the corner like it might explode. The fridge door was cracked open, casting pale light over the peeling linoleum floor, and inside it sat one baby bottle, half full, lukewarm, and already expired. His son, Milo, whimpered softly from the couch, bundled in 2 layers of onesies and a knitted hat that was too small now, but still smelled like his late mother's perfume. Caleb wiped his hands down his jeans, then over his face. He hadn't shaved in days, hadn't slept in longer. His phone screen lit up. No new texts, no calls. Just the time, 11:53 p.m. 1 hour left on the Wi-Fi. He'd scraped together enough coins to keep active for a day. 1 hour to find help. He had 3.27 his account, not enough for even a small can of formula. 6 months ago, life had been different. Caleb had a wife, a steady job at Ryder Freight Logistics, and a second-hand Toyota that ran more reliably than most things in their life. He was never rich, but he was proud. He provided. Then came the complications. Birth trauma, a cascade of infections, a goodbye that made no sense. Just him holding her hand in a quiet room while Milo wailed in a plastic bassinet. Now it was just the two of them. Caleb tried every charity hotline, applied for assistance that wouldn't process for 3 more weeks, called churches, waited in line at food banks only to be turned away when the shelves ran dry. He'd pawned his wedding ring to buy diapers. At 11:59, he took a breath and typed out a message on his cracked phone screen. Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Caleb Morgan, a former warehouse worker. My wife passed away after childbirth. I'm raising our son alone. I don't want a handout. If there's anything I can do for work, anything, please let me know. I just need to buy formula tonight. Please. He hesitated, then tapped send to the last contact he'd saved from a company-wide list during his job at Ryder Freight. The number didn't have a name attached. He prayed it was a shift supervisor. Maybe a foreman. He didn't know it was the personal cell phone of Nicholas Wexler, CEO of Wexler Global Freight, a logistics giant, and the man behind Ryder's acquisition. Meanwhile, 900 miles away in New York City, Nicholas Wexler had just finished a late-night meeting with investors. The world saw him as invincible, clean-cut, 42 years old, living in a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, worth over $500 million. But tonight his apartment felt empty. His 15-year-old daughter, Ava, hadn't returned his calls all day. His ex-wife had just sent a not-so-subtle reminder about their therapy bill. His scotch was warm. His inbox was full of things that didn't matter. Then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He almost deleted it, but something, perhaps the name, Caleb Morgan, made him pause. He read it twice. There was no request for charity, just a man asking for work, late at night, mentioning his infant son. Nicholas stared at the text, the city lights twinkling behind him. He didn't know why, but something about the message gripped him. He picked up his phone and typed back, "To where are you located?" "To back in the tiny apartment in Indiana." Caleb blinked at the screen. He nearly dropped the phone. A reply, "Tor, I'm in Bloomington, sir. Sorry if I texted the wrong person. I was desperate." There was a pause. Caleb could see the 3 little dots blinking. Then, "Tor, I know who you are. You worked for Ryder Freight. I own that company now. I'm going to help you." Oh, Caleb sat down on the floor and burst into tears. Caleb didn't sleep that night. How could he? His hands were still shaking from the message that lit up his screen like a sunrise in a pitch-black room. He'd been ready to give up. Not on Milo, never on Milo, but on hope. That cruel little voice had been whispering all day, "You're out of options, Caleb. You're not enough. Your son deserves better." But now, the richest man he could imagine, someone who probably flew private jets and signed multi-million-dollar contracts between appetizers, was messaging him. A broke, exhausted widower who hadn't been able to afford a cab in 2 months. "Send me your address," Nicholas had texted next. Then, "Someone will be there in 45 minutes. Caleb didn't know what to think. He almost replied, "Please don't joke with me," but didn't. Instead, he texted back his exact location: a crumbling apartment complex off South Rogers Street, apartment 2B, a place where porch lights flickered and the neighbors whispered through drywall. At 1:18 a.m., headlights swept across the window. A dark SUV pulled into the parking lot. Not police, not a food bank van, black Cadillac Escalade, tinted windows. Caleb held Milo tight, heart hammering. A knock on the door. Standing outside was a man in a long gray coat, middle-aged, calm eyes, earpiece curled into his collar. "Mr. Morgan." Caleb nodded. The man stepped forward, handing him a thick brown bag with a receipt stapled to the top. "There's formula, diapers, wipes, infant Tylenol, and a few meals for you, Mr. Wexler says he'll call in the morning." Caleb could barely stammer out a thank you. His voice cracked somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. He looked down into the bag and saw brand names he'd only ever seen in commercials. Everything new. Nothing expired. No off-brand powder and faded packaging. He dropped to his knees beside Milo and wept. Not because of the formula, but because someone, a stranger, had seen him and cared. The call at 7:03 a.m. Caleb's phone rang, the screen simply ready. Nicholas W. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Morgan," came the voice, deep, crisp, professional. "How's your son?" Caleb cleared his throat. "Hey," twice. "He slept like a rock." "Good," Nicholas said. "No, let's talk about your future." Caleb didn't respond. He didn't know if he should sit, stand, or fall over. "You were a shift lead in warehouse ops," Nicholas continued. "Your evaluations were solid. Never missed a day. I looked you up last night." You looked me up?" Caleb asked, stunned. "Yes," Nicholas replied. "People like you are rare. And right now, I need rare people. We've got a new expansion in Louisville. It's fast-moving and short-staffed. The position pays $62,000 a year, benefits, relocation covered. Training starts in 10 days. Caleb's jaw dropped. "But," he whispered, "I can't move right now. I don't have a car." "Or, we'll handle that," Nicholas said calmly. "You take care of your son. We'll take care of the rest." Would two worlds collide 3 days later? A black sedan pulled up again, but this time it wasn't a man with a grocery bag. It was a woman in a navy blue blazer, HR, a relocation officer. She sat on the floor of Caleb's apartment, played with Milo while Caleb signed papers he couldn't believe were real. 3 weeks later, they were living in a freshly painted 2-bedroom townhouse in Louisville, minutes away from a brand new Wexler logistics facility. He was handed keys to a company, leased Honda Civic. He received a company laptop, a phone, a schedule that let him spend afternoons with Milo. He was offered grief counseling, a pediatrician referral, and subsidized daycare if he needed it. And most days he still couldn't believe it. A surprise visit 6 months into the job. Things were steady. Caleb wasn't just surviving, he was building a life. He'd become a shift manager. Co-workers respected him. Milo was crawling, laughing, eating solid food. One spring morning, Caleb walked into the lobby and froze. Nicholas Wexler was there, in person. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards or assistants. He wore a simple button-up shirt and jeans. He was holding a stuffed elephant. "Thought I'd drop by," Nicholas said casually. "I wanted to meet Milo." Caleb blinked. "His with daycare." "Then I'll wait," Nicholas smiled. They sat in the break room, talked about fatherhood, about loss, about the strange, sacred duty of raising a child in the absence of the person who should have been there to help. "Do you know why I responded to your message that night?" Nicholas asked, leaning forward. Caleb shook his head. "Because once, a long time ago, I sent a desperate text to the wrong person too," he said softly. "And someone saved me." 3 months after Nicholas's unexpected visit, Caleb had settled into a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. He no longer counted quarters before heading to the store. He no longer checked the expiration date on every bottle of milk like it was life or death. And at night, when Milo curled into his side with a soft sigh of comfort, Caleb allowed himself to believe maybe we're okay now. Still, something about that visit stuck with him, the way Nicholas had said it. "I sent a desperate text once too." It wasn't just a nice thing to say. There had been weight in his voice. Pain, like a door had opened, just for a moment, and quickly shut again. Caleb hadn't asked. He'd been too overwhelmed. too grateful. But that sentence lived in his head. The conference. In mid-July, Caleb was asked to attend a regional management conference in Chicago, a whirlwind of logistics updates, keynote speakers, and strategy sessions. It was the kind of event that people in his old life would never imagine him attending. The hotel was a polished marble palace of glass and gold trim, valets, bellhops, the kind of place Sophie used to point out from car windows and say, "Maybe on our anniversary someday." Caleb checked into his room and laid out Milo's picture on the nightstand. Then he stepped into the elevator, badge clipped to his shirt, schedule in hand, and there, standing alone in the mirrored interior, was Nicholas Wexler. No guards, no assistant, just the CEO staring at the floor numbers like any regular guy. Their eyes met in the reflection. "Hey," Nicholas said, smiling. "Didn't think you'd be here this early." Caleb chuckled nervously. "Didn't think I'd ever be invited." They rode in silence for a moment before Caleb found his courage. "That day, when I first texted you," Caleb said quietly, "you mentioned something about sending a text yourself." Nicholas's face shifted, not angry, not distant, but pained. "Yeah," he said after a long pause. "I remember. Was it real?" Caleb asked. Nicholas turned to him. "It was 2006, he began. I was broke. Not like media broke, real broke. I'd just been fired from a shipping firm for whistleblowing. Couldn't get hired anywhere. Had a baby daughter. My wife had left. I was behind on rent, and I had 6s to my name." Caleb listened, heart thudding. "I meant to text an old college buddy," Nicholas said. "Beg for a couch. Maybe a meal. I accidentally texted the wrong Chris in my contacts. Turned out to be a consultant I met at a trade conference. Guy barely knew me. But he replied, drove across town, and offered me a contract job with his firm that night. That gig got me back on my feet." Nicholas looked at Caleb, his eyes clear and raw. "So yeah," he said, "your message hit home. Not because I'm some hero, but because I've been the guy who couldn't afford Formula 2. Milo's health scare. Caleb returned from the conference energized. But 3 weeks later, life threw another curveball. Milo spiked a fever. He wouldn't eat, slept too long, whimpered in his sleep. At the pediatric ER, the nurse ran blood tests. Hours dragged. Caleb paced, holding his son's tiny sock in his pocket like a prayer. A doctor approached. Serious face, kind voice. "It's likely a virus, but there's something in the blood work we don't like. White blood cell count is high. We'd like to do further tests." Caleb's hands went cold. His legs weakened. "What does that mean?" he whispered. "We're not sure, but we want to rule out leukemia." The word landed like thunder. To the call that changed everything again, it was 2:21 a.m. when Caleb called Nicholas. He didn't mean to. His fingers moved before his brain caught up. Nicholas answered on the second ring. "Is it Milo?" Caleb could barely speak. They said they're testing him for." "I'll be there," Nicholas said. "Right now?" And he was. 3 hours later, Nicholas was sitting on the hospital bench beside Caleb, holding 2 cups of black coffee. No assistant, no driver, just a man who once needed help himself, now offering it in the quietest, most powerful way. The waiting room bond. They waited for test results for 36 hours. Nicholas never left. He took calls from the hallway, answered board emails on a tablet balanced on a hospital tray, but he never left Caleb's side. When Caleb dozed off, head against the wall, Nicholas tucked a blanket around Milo. When Caleb finally broke, sobbing quietly into his fists, Nicholas didn't say anything. He just stayed. Good news and a deeper truth. The diagnosis came not leukemia, just a rare viral infection. Milo would need rest, fluids, and close monitoring, but he would recover. Caleb cried so hard, the nurse hugged him. Nicholas stepped outside, took a long breath, and wiped his eyes. They didn't speak again until the next morning, as the sun rose through the hospital windows. "I've been thinking," Nicholas said, "about your future." Caleb looked up. "I don't want to just help you, I want to build something with you." It was still quiet in the pediatric ward. Machines hummed softly, monitors blinked, and the sunlight creeping across the tiled floor signaled the start of another day. One Caleb never thought he'd see with such clarity again. Milo was sleeping peacefully, finally fever-free. Nicholas stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the skyline turn from gold to blue. Caleb walked over, sipping cold coffee from a hospital cup. "You said something yesterday," Caleb said quietly, "about building something together." Nicholas nodded. "Yes." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "You mean, like, a project?" Nicholas turned and faced him fully. "I mean a movement." To the idea back in the early days of Wexler Freight, Nicholas used to keep a list in a notebook titled, "If I ever make it big." It was scribbled in messy ink. Back when he slept in a shared apartment and ate canned beans for dinner. One entry read chore, create a program for single parents in crisis, help them back on their feet, give them work, dignity, and support. I never followed through, Nicholas admitted. I told myself I didn't have time, that it was complicated. But after meeting you after this, I realized I wasn't just waiting, I was afraid. Afraid of what? Caleb asked. Of caring too much, he replied. That night, in that hospital hallway, Nicholas pitched it a foundation, started with Caleb, aimed at helping struggling single parents access emergency resources, temporary jobs, housing assistance, and on-ramps into stable employment, especially in the logistics and supply chain world where Nicholas had pull. And not just a one-time handout, an ongoing, dignified pathway back to life. Caleb was stunned. But I'm just You're exactly who this needs to start with, Nicholas said. Someone who's lived it. The launch 3 months later. In a repurposed shipping warehouse near downtown Louisville, the very first Bridge Forward Center opened its doors. There was no media, no flashy ribbon cutting. Just a few folding chairs, coffee in styrofoam cups, and a dozen tired but hopeful faces, most of them single parents who had walked the same road Caleb had. Caleb stood nervously at the front of the room beside Nicholas. His voice trembled when he began. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not rich. I'm not even sure I'm the right person to be standing here, he said, but 6 months ago, I texted a stranger asking for help, not because I wanted pity, but because I had nothing left to try. And he replied. He paused, and now I'm telling you, you're not alone, you're not forgotten, and this place, this movement, is here because of people like you. From one to many, in the year that followed, Bridge Forward expanded rapidly. 2 more centers opened in Ohio, another in western Pennsylvania, then one in Nova Scotia. Nicholas funded them quietly, working behind the scenes. Caleb trained staff, met with struggling parents, oversaw logistics, and personally called every applicant. By the second year, over 900 families had received support, nearly 600 had found full-time employment, dozens had transitioned into management-level jobs, single dads who had been couch surfing with infants, now managing warehouse crews, single moms who had left abusive situations, now supervising customer service teams. It wasn't charity, it was dignity. The awards and the interview. By year 3, word had spread. Nicholas was invited to speak at economic summits. Caleb was interviewed on national television. The interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman from a British media outlet, looked up from her notes mid-interview. You were once unable to afford formula, she said. And now you're leading an organization that's changed thousands of lives. Caleb shifted in his chair. I don't see it like that, he replied. I see it like this: a baby was hungry, and a stranger answered a message. That's what changed the world. A familiar text one night. Caleb was sitting in his Louisville office. The walls decorated with crayon drawings from Milo and thank you notes from parents he'd helped. When his phone buzzed, unknown number. Hi, my name is Ria. I don't know if this is the right number, but I have a 6-month-old daughter. I lost my job last week. I'm sleeping in my car. If there's any kind of work I can do, please, just point me in the right direction. I don't want pity. I just want to feed my child. Caleb stared at the message. He looked over at a framed photo of Nicholas and Milo from the hospital, both asleep on opposite ends of the same couch. He smiled. Then he picked up the phone. The woman's name was Ria Maddox, 29, former shift cook at a nursing home in Dayton, Ohio. Left her job when her baby Sky had pneumonia, and they threatened to fire her for too many call-ins. Then her landlord raised the rent. One domino tipped another, and within 3 weeks, She was sleeping in her car behind a gas station with her baby in the back seat. Ria's message wasn't long. It didn't beg. It didn't even explain everything. It simply read tore. I don't want pity. I just want to feed my child. Those were the same words Caleb had once written. He could almost see himself in her tone, the panic masked as resilience, the pride trembling beneath the surface. He didn't hesitate. The call Caleb called her that same night. "Ria?" he said gently when she answered. Her voice was cautious, the background quiet except for a baby's soft cry. "Who is this?" "My name's Caleb Morgan. I'm the founder of a group called Bridge Forward. Someone helped me once when I didn't have formula for my baby, and now it's my turn." Silence, a sniff, then a quiet sob. "I didn't even think anyone would respond," she said. He smiled. "Neither did I, once." Ria's rise by noon the next day. Bridge Forward had a hotel booked for her and baby Sky, fresh clothes, formula, diapers. Caleb had her picked up by a local staff member, a former single mother named Teresa who'd gone through the program herself and now led the Ohio branch. 2 weeks later, Ria was working part-time at a Bridge Forward logistics center. 2 months after that, she was managing inventory systems and getting her GED with help from the Foundation's adult education program. She wasn't just surviving, she was building. And one day, when a single dad named Jalen messaged the hotline in a panic after his apartment caught fire, it was Ria who called him back, packed a duffel of baby supplies, and drove 3 hours to find him at a rest stop. "I know how it feels," she told him, "but you're not alone anymore." Nicholas's daughter back in New York. Nicholas Wexler was pacing outside a therapy center in Tribeca. His daughter Eva, now 18, had just finished her group counseling session. She was thriving now, no longer the angry, distant teenager she once was. She worked part-time at a cafe and planned to study social work. But tonight, she had a question. "Dad," she said as they walked together through the evening traffic, "can I volunteer at one of the Bridge Forward centers? Maybe the one in Philly?" Nicholas paused. "Why Philly?" "Because I want to know what it's like. Where people aren't just numbers. I want to be part of what you and Caleb are doing." He didn't answer at first. He just wrapped an arm around her shoulder. Then, quietly, "You have no idea what that means to me." Hello to Caleb and Milo. A new chapter. Caleb's life was nothing like it used to be. He wasn't rich, at least not in money, but he had built something that fed him in ways no paycheck ever had. Milo was now almost 3, talkative, obsessed with dinosaurs, and running around the Bridge Forward daycare like he owned it. One day, Caleb sat at his desk, watching Milo color with Ria's daughter in the playroom. A woman named Nina, a single mother of twins, was preparing to interview for her first salary job in 4 years. And a man named Victor, who used to sleep on a park bench with his toddler wrapped in a hoodie, was now on the board of directors for the Ohio branch. Caleb sat back and let it wash over him. This wasn't just a nonprofit, it was a legacy of a mistake, a misdialed number, a desperate plea, a quiet yes, and now, it was hundreds of yeses echoing across cities, highways, and hearts. To the gala 2 years later, Bridge Forward hosted its first official gala. A fundraiser, a celebration, and a tribute to what can happen when someone chooses kindness instead of silence. It wasn't glamorous, no tuxedos, no glittering champagne, just people. Tired, grateful, radiant. Caleb stood on stage holding Milo, who had fallen asleep in his arms halfway through the speeches. Nicholas stood beside them. When Caleb spoke, his voice was quiet. "This isn't a story about a CEO or a nonprofit. It's not about me. Or even just about Milo. It's about what happens when you choose to care, when you reply to the text, when you answer the door, when you stop and say, 'I see you.'" The room went quiet, and then, thunderous applause. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon in Louisville when Caleb Morgan's past came knocking. Quite literally. He was just finishing up a planning meeting when his phone buzzed with a security alert from the Bridge Forward front desk. "Chore. Man at reception says he knows you, won't give a last name, says it's personal. Should we send him away?" Caleb blinked at the message, confused. He stared at the camera snapshot attached below. The man was older now, a little heavier, graying at the temples. still wearing the same kind of worn flannel he always had. And those eyes, it was his father, the same man who had walked out of Caleb's life 20 years ago. The man who left one day for cigarettes and never came back. The man who hadn't attended Sophie's funeral, hadn't called when Milo was born, hadn't even texted when Caleb's mother passed away. Now he stood at the front desk, hat in hand. The first conversation, they met in the small break room near the loading bay. Caleb stood with his arms crossed. Milo, thankfully, was at press school. The older man shifted awkwardly in his seat. "You've done good," he said quietly. Caleb didn't speak. "I saw you on the news. That program of yours, helping single parents. It's something. I mean that." Caleb sat slowly. "You didn't come when Sophie died," he said, voice flat. "I know," his father whispered. "I didn't know how. You didn't know how to show up." Silence. Then his father leaned forward. "I was a coward, always have been. I wasn't there for your mother, I wasn't there for you. But when I saw that segment on TV, I saw your face, and I realized what I'd missed." Caleb clenched his jaw. "I'm not here for money," the man added, "or pity, just wanted to see the son I left behind. Maybe shake your hand. Maybe tell that little boy of yours he comes from more than just loss." Caleb stormed that night. Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch with a mug of tea growing cold in his hands. Milo was inside, snoring softly with his stuffed triceratops tucked under one arm. Why now? Why after everything did the man who left him, who let him cry himself to sleep for years, decide it was time? And why did it still hurt? He expected to feel nothing, but what he felt was everything: pain, rage, hope, grief, confusion. Nicholas called. "You okay?" he asked. Caleb didn't answer for a full minute. Then, softly, "He showed up today." Nicholas paused. "Your father?" "Yeah." "What did he say?" "That he was a coward," Caleb said. "That he wanted to see me, see Milo." Nicholas didn't respond right away. Then finally, "Sometimes the people who leave come back not because they expect forgiveness, but because regret finally outweighed their fear." Caleb exhaled shakily. "Doesn't make it fair," he said. "No," Nicholas replied, "but it might make it real." An unexpected piece 2 days later, Caleb walked into the playroom during visiting hours and saw Milo sitting beside the man who once abandoned him, now showing him how to fold paper into airplanes. They weren't laughing. They weren't having a movie moment reunion. They were just sitting, learning, existing. Later, as they walked toward the parking lot, Caleb stopped. "You can't rewrite the past," he said to his father. "But if you want to help fold some paper, or maybe show up once in a while, really show up, I won't stop you." His father's eyes filled. "I'll be there," he whispered, and for the first time in 2 decades, Caleb believed him. To Bridge Forward expands again. In the months that followed, Bridge Forward launched 2 more centers, one in Atlanta and one in Windsor, Ontario. Both were spearheaded by former recipients of the program, parents who had once stood in food bank lines and now led teams, gave talks, and offered hope. Caleb's story, and Ria's, and Victor's and Nina's, was no longer an exception. It was a blueprint. Nicholas stepped further back into the shadows, letting Caleb take more of the spotlight. He insisted it wasn't his story anymore. Caleb, however, always reminded the media, "Cho, this started with a text to the wrong person. A man who could have ignored it, but didn't." Milo's birthday. On Milo's 4th birthday, the community center was packed with balloons, donated cupcakes, and families who all knew the story of how Bridge Forward was born. Milo didn't remember the days without food, but everyone else did. Nicholas arrived late, carrying a gift wrapped in blue paper and a card that said, "Chore to Milo, you changed your father's life before you could speak, and because of that, you changed mine too." Uncle Nick. Caleb hugged him tight. No words, just tears. It started with a power outage at the Bridge Forward Center in Atlanta. A faulty transformer left the building dark for nearly 10 hours. Normally, that wouldn't have been a disaster, but the outage came on the same day the center was hosting a night shelter program, a new pilot for homeless single parents with newborns. There were 37 mothers, 6 fathers, and 44 children under the age of 6. And suddenly no heat, no lights. No working refrigerators for milk and baby formula. Within hours, the news made it to Caleb's desk in Louisville. He was on a video call with Rhea and Victor, planning a donor retreat, when his assistant slipped him a note. Chore, emergency in ATL, full center blackout, people still inside. Caleb stood without a word and left the room. The first scramble by 3 p.m. Caleb was on a flight to Atlanta. Nicholas met him at the gate. "I figured you'd come. How bad is it?" Nicholas sighed. "We've got backup generators running now. But the story is already out there. The media's asking how a foundation with millions in funding has no emergency plan for vulnerable infants." Caleb winced. "Would you have a plan? Not one that worked. Not when it counted." Caleb rubbed his face. The guilt was immediate and irrational, but it was there. Bridge Forward had grown so quickly. So many centers, so many moving pieces. He delegated, trusted, assumed everything was functioning like the flagship in Louisville. He should have known better. A storm of accusations. The headlines the next morning were brutal. Families left in the dark. Literally, bridge forward or bridge too fast. From hero to hubris. Did Caleb Morgan expand too quickly? Within hours, donors began emailing. Some were worried, some angry. One major partner pulled funding for a new center in Chicago. And through it all, Caleb felt something he hadn't in years: fear. Not fear of failure, but fear of letting people down. Of becoming the very system he once begged for help from. That night, Caleb sat on the floor of a borrowed apartment in Atlanta with Milo asleep beside him in a travel crib. He stared at the ceiling. Then his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "To Chohai. You don't know me. My name's Lucinda. I'm 22. I was in the Atlanta Center last night with my son Theo. I just wanted to say thank you. I know the lights went out, but the kindness didn't. Your people didn't leave us. They handed out flashlights. They kept singing lullabies. I saw a worker give her own dinner to a hungry mom. You built something real. Just wanted you to know that. Before the noise gets too loud." Caleb read the message 3 times, then he put the phone down, quietly weeping into his hands. To crisis control. The next morning, Caleb called an all-hands emergency meeting, virtual, and broadcast across all Bridge Forward centers. His voice was calm but firm. "We messed up," he began. "I messed up. We grew fast, faster than maybe we should have. And when the test came, it showed our weak spots." He paused. "But this isn't about blame. It's about alignment. We started this with one message. No one gets left behind. That doesn't change now." He announced an immediate freeze on new expansions. Every dollar and every hour would now be invested into fortifying existing centers, safety upgrades, disaster protocols, better staff support. Then he closed with, "Tor, mistakes are inevitable. Abandonment is not. We are still the hands that catch when the world drops people. Let's prove it." Applause echoed across call screens. T2 returned to humility in the weeks that followed. Caleb returned to basics. He stopped flying first class, walked into centers unannounced, sat beside janitors and talked to night shift nurses. He started writing personal thank you notes, dozens a week, to volunteers who stayed late or went the extra mile. Bridge Forward wasn't crumbling. It was evolving. Nicholas, who had seen empires rise and fall, smiled quietly when he saw Caleb on his knees scrubbing a kitchen floor after a food delivery spill. "You're not a CEO," he said. Caleb grinned. "Not today. I'm not. You're something better. Coup, a birthday, a flashlight, a future." On the anniversary of the Atlanta blackout, the Bridge Forward Center hosted a nighttime gathering. Candles, music, soft light everywhere. Lucinda was there with baby Theo, now a chubby-cheeked toddler with curly hair and an obsession with toy trains. As she handed Caleb a small box, she smiled. He opened it. Inside was a plastic toy flashlight, wrapped in a bow. "It's silly," she said, "but that night it was all we had, and it kept us safe." Caleb knelt beside Theo. "You saved this?" he asked, gently. Lucinda nodded. "It reminded me what mattered. You reminded me." Caleb didn't speak. He just hugged her. And when the lights dimmed at the party, 100 children turned on little toy flashlights all at once, turning the night into stars. It was a crisp October morning in Louisville when the email arrived. The subject line read, "Keynote invitation, Global Summit on Equity and Innovation, Oslo 2026, Caleb almost deleted it. It looked like another request for money, or maybe a spam invitation to one of those conferences where people congratulated themselves into exhaustion. But something about the sender name made him pause. Dr. Sophia Elmasary. He remembered it. She had been the lead researcher on a paper about digital poverty and food insecurity, one of the most respected voices in humanitarian innovation. The message was short. Chore, Mr. Morgan, I've followed your journey since the first article about Milo. My team and I believe your story. And the model you've built offers a real-world blueprint for sustainable intervention. Would you consider joining us in Oslo to open the summit? You won't be speaking to politicians. You'll be speaking to problem solvers. Warm regards, Sophia. If Caleb leaned back in his chair, he hadn't stood on a stage since the early Bridge Forward days. He wasn't sure he wanted to. He was tired of the spotlight, tired of his own face in articles. But something in that line, you won't be speaking to politicians, hit differently. He thought of Milo. He thought of a toy flashlight and a boy's laugh in the dark. Then he clicked. Reply. Preparation and doubt. In the weeks before the summit, Caleb wrote and rewrote his talk over and over. Nothing sounded right. The foundation's board wanted him to share metrics. How many families helped? How many cities served? How much overhead had been reduced? The PR team encouraged him to mention the celebrity donors and tech partnerships. But every time he stood in front of the mirror, practicing those facts, he felt like he was fading behind the numbers. One night, frustrated and unable to sleep, he asked Milo, now 5, what he thought Daddy should talk about. Milo, in pajamas and jelly-covered lips, shrugged and said, Chore. Just tell them the story when I didn't have no milk and you made a lady cry, and then she made you cry, and then we had a lot of noodles. It wasn't wrong. To the Oslo summit, the conference hall in Oslo was a mixture of sharp design and quiet tension, all glass and steel, filled with people in expensive clothes, badges, tablets, and polite urgency. Caleb stood backstage, heart pounding. He looked down at the note card he'd decided to bring, just one. It read Tor. Text message, wrong number. Everything changed when the moderator introduced him, not as a CEO, but as father who dared to ask the world for help. Caleb walked onto the stage in jeans and an old jacket. No teleprompter, no slideshow. Just a mic and a story. View the speech. He began simply. Chore, 5 years ago I sent a text asking for help to feed my infant son. I was broke, desperate, alone. It was supposed to go to my old boss. It went to a stranger. That stranger called me. Not to shame me, not to block me. He asked me how I was really doing, and then he came, and that one mistake led to a series of second chances. He told them everything. The garage, the eviction, the call, the first meeting with Nicholas, the baby formula, the tiny office, the long nights, the first donation, the backlash, the blackout. He talked about how often systems fail quietly in the dark, where no one notices, until someone sends the wrong text to the right person. He didn't cry, but the crowd did, and when he ended, there was no applause at first, just a wave of silence, like the room had to feel before it could respond. Then it came, not polite clapping, but thunderous standing ovation. To the doors that opened in the weeks after the summit, Caleb received over 2,000 emails, not from journalists, not from donors, but from people. A nurse in Brazil, a father in Manchester, a grandmother in Kenya who had started a food drive in her village after watching his talk online. Nicholas forwarded him a link. The video of his speech had gone viral, over 12 million views. And one of the messages, forwarded by Bridge Forward's main inbox, stood out. Hey, Mr. Caleb. My name is Tommy. I live in Idaho. I'm a single dad too. I saw your talk. My little girl's name is Amber. We're struggling. I don't have your courage yet, but I wanted to say thank you for showing me it's not shameful to ask. I think I'm gonna try. Tommy and Amber. The call that brought it full circle. 2 months after the summit, Caleb sat at a school event watching Milo perform a skit about firefighters. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. He hesitated, then picked up. Hello. A voice answered, slightly older, unsure. Hi, I don't know if you remember me. Oh, I think I was the CEO you texted all those years ago. Caleb froze. I never told anyone. But I've watched from a distance. You probably don't even remember my name. Caleb's eyes welled up. I do, Roger. A long pause. I saw the video. Roger continued. I just wanted to say thank you for becoming the man you became, and for forgiving me without saying it. I didn't need to say it, Caleb replied. You showed up. Silence again, then a chuckle. You still like Raymond? Roger asked. Always. I'm buying. The sign was still there. Caleb's Auto and Repairs. Sun faded, crooked, half the letters chipped. The old shop looked almost untouched, like a relic preserved by time, even though it had been abandoned for nearly 5 years. Caleb stood outside the rusted roller door, holding Milo's hand, now 6 years old and too curious for his own good. Dad, this is where you used to live. Work, Caleb corrected gently. Mostly work. But sometimes, yeah, it felt like I lived here too. The place had been listed for sale again. After the owner passed, it sat empty, unsold. A bank held the title now. Nicholas had sent him the listing as a joke. Buy your origin story. The subject line read. But Caleb hadn't laughed. He just stared at the photos for a long time. Now, months later, they stood at the threshold. The idea later that night, over dinner with Nicholas and Sasha, Caleb laid it out. I want to buy it. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. For what? Nostalgia. No, Caleb replied. For beginnings. He unfolded a small sketch he'd drawn on the back of a napkin. A place for transitional families, single parents, guardians, caregivers who had fallen between the cracks. It wouldn't be a shelter. It would be a launch pad, a garage for broken things, and people to get rebuilt. Few old friends knew purpose when word spread that Caleb Morgan had returned to his old shop. Old faces resurfaced. Kelsey, the diner waitress who used to sneak him leftover sandwiches, showed up with a tray of blueberry muffins. Dante, who once helped him tow in a busted pickup without payment, arrived with a toolbox and offered to help fix the doors for free. Even Mr. Navarro, the grumpy landlord who had tried to evict him once, sent a donation. They didn't come for publicity. They came because they remembered him, not as a viral speaker or founder, but as a man who once patched tires for free, who cried behind a tool cabinet when his baby was hungry, who never turned anyone away, even when he had nothing. To Milo's Corner, the first thing rebuilt in the new center wasn't an office or intake room. It was a playroom, bright, open, safe, filled with books, blankets, plush toys, and soft lights. On one wall, in big blue letters, it read Chore Milo's Corner, for little lights in tough times. Milo picked the colors. He picked the beanbags. He helped paint stars on the ceiling with glow in the dark paint. One evening, while Caleb was locking up, he found Milo sitting with a boy named Ray, no more than 4, whose mother had just arrived that day, escaping domestic violence. Milo was reading to him, something about dragons and dads. Caleb didn't interrupt. He just watched. A decision at the crossroads. Months passed. Bridge Forward expanded faster than ever. Donations poured in. Big tech offered partnerships. Politicians made appearances. And with that came a dilemma. The board proposed centralizing operations in New York, where tax benefits and visibility could triple their impact. They wanted Caleb to relocate, become the executive face full-time, attend global forums and lead from the front. It was tempting. Nicholas was in favor. Sasha was neutral. The board leaned hard, but Caleb hesitated. Then one morning, he opened a letter addressed to Mr. Caleb Morgan, Milo's dad, the garage with the toy box. Inside was a crayon drawing. A man fixing a car surrounded by kids, with a giant sun overhead. The child had written, Chore, you made a place where moms can be brave and kids can be loud. I like that. No signature, no return address. That same day, Caleb walked into the board meeting and handed them a printed sheet. SOAR proposal rejected. Expansion yes. Relocation no. We lead from the garage. P reunions one foggy afternoon, as Caleb was helping install shelves in the pantry, a voice behind him said, You never did finish fixing my alternator. He turned. Samantha. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with silver, her eyes kind. And next to her stood her daughter, now 9, beaming, holding a basket of bread rolls. You remember me? She asked. I remember everything, Caleb said softly. Every word you didn't say. They hugged. She'd gone back to school. became a licensed nutritionist, started a community garden that donated fresh produce every week. "And this is Lily," she said proudly. The girl held out a piece of paper, a list of food allergies and preferences. "For the kids," she said. Caleb smiled. "We'll post it right by the fridge." 2 years down the line, time passed. The garage grew. So did Milo. So did the kids who came and went. So did the legacy that had started with one wrong number. In the quiet moments, between bedtime stories and shelf building, between keynote invites and late night coffee refills, Caleb sometimes thought back to that text. How easy it would have been for it to go unanswered. How much he owed to a stranger who simply answered with compassion instead of judgment. How a mistake had become a map. 15 years later, the garage looked different now, expanded, modern, still true to its bones. The sign had been replaced, but the name stayed the same: Caleb's Auto and Family Center, half garage, half community resource hub, all heart. Inside Caleb's once calloused hands were now more comfortable signing paperwork than changing spark plugs, though he still insisted on tuning at least one car a week to stay grounded, as he put it. He stood by the window, watching a group of volunteers paint new murals on the side wall. A phoenix rising, flames giving way to doves. Kids' names scribbled in the feathers. Behind him, Sasha tapped on a tablet. "Press is here in 15. CN wants a walkthrough," and the BBC called again. "They're doing a feature on international grassroots change makers." Caleb smiled, distracted. "I'll give them the same answer I always do." She smirked. "You'd rather be out there cleaning oil stains than standing in front of a camera, huh?" He turned to her. "I just like being useful." She softened. "You are. More than you know." Milo Morgan, 16 and unstoppable. Milo had grown tall, his father's jaw, his mother's eyes. A soccer star at his high school, but his heart was in the garage. He volunteered every weekend. Sometimes Caleb caught him walking families through the center, his voice calm, eyes sharp, answering questions the way Caleb once did. One night, Milo sat down with him under the big tree out back. Fireflies blinked around them. "I want to apply to Dartmouth," Milo said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious." "I've been working on a proposal," Milo said, pulling out a notebook. "I want to major in social policy, maybe law. Eventually expand what we do here. Help kids who never even get close to a safe place like this." Caleb nodded slowly. "That sounds a lot like changing the world." Milo smirked. "I learned from the best." The twist, a familiar face. Weeks later, on a rainy Thursday, Caleb got an unusual call. "Mr. Morgan," said a nervous voice. "My name's Kristen. You don't know me, but my mom told me about you for years." Caleb listened. She said, when she was pregnant, homeless, and scared, someone helped her. Brought her into a place with warmth. A man who didn't judge, just opened a door. Caleb sat down slowly. "My mom passed 2 months ago. Cancer. She never told me his name. Just that he saved us. We were going through her things when I found an old key. It said CM01. She kept it in a locket." A pause. "I found the address online, the old garage. I just wanted to say thank you." Caleb blinked hard, a lump forming. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Kristen Holt." "My mom was Samantha Holt." The return of a life changed. Kristen came the next day. She looked so much like Samantha that Caleb had to steady himself when he saw her. She carried that same quiet strength, that same protective instinct. She was 24 now, studying to be a therapist for at-risk youth. She never stopped talking about this place. Kristen said, walking through the halls with Caleb, she said this garage changed everything. In the playroom, she stood quietly, reading the mural. Her eyes welled up. "That's her handwriting," she whispered, pointing to a tiny quote painted in the corner. "Sure, every child deserves to feel safe. Just once, just for a moment. Sometimes that's all it takes." Caleb smiled. "She wrote that on a napkin once," he said. "I kept it." The final phone call, late one night, alone in his small upstairs office, Caleb's phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. He answered. There was a pause. Then, "I don't know if this is the right number. I was given it by someone at a shelter. I don't know what else to do." Caleb's chest tightened. "I have a daughter. She's 6 months. I lost my job. We've been sleeping in my car. I can't keep doing this. He closed his eyes. Where are you? He asked, standing already, keys in hand. The voice broke into sobs. You're not gonna hang up. No, Caleb whispered. Someone didn't hang up on me once either. 2 years from now, they would tell the story in schools. The single dad who sent a text to a CEO by mistake. The CEO who replied. The garage that became a movement. The child who became a leader. The lives rebuilt, one moment, one meal, one kind word at a time. Please subscribe my channel.